In this section, we're going to be building our App Designer app and using the class library we built in the previous section. First of all, though, we've got to find our class library or the DLL file that the Visual Studio created. So let's go and do that. So here we are in my file browser, and we can see that in the directory that I asked to keep the solution, there is our solution directory. If I double click on that, we can see the SLN or the solution file for Visual Studio, and then we've got a folder for each project in our solution. We're interested in the DLL for my Syspro utils, so we go into here now. For the sake of this course, I'm just going to simply grab hold of the DLL, but within Visual Studio, the proper way of doing this is to create a proper release DLL, put versioning on it, probably use source code control and do the business properly. But for the sake of this video, I'm just simply going to grab the DLL that we've created. This will be in bin, debug. There's net 8.0 because that was the framework we chose, if you remember. And lo and behold, there is our DLL. So what we've got to do is copy that somewhere that will be easily accessible by our app. And since we know the app references base managed assemblies anyway, so we're going to copy this one. And I'm going to pop it into my base managed assemblies, which is down here. Base, where are we? Managed assemblies. And we'll just simply paste it in here. And that's all we've got to do at that stage. So the next step now is to launch App Designer, link it to our code, and design an app that's going to use them. Okay, so here we are back in App Designer, and what I've done is knocked up a custom application that mimics the VBScript sample that we saw right at the beginning. So we just basically got a form, got two fields, and if I run this app, what we have is a button on here, and if I say hello, at the moment, all I've got is a message box just telling me that I've actually pressed it. So what we've got to do now is go to the code and start wiring up our DLL that we've saved into base managed assemblies. So let's have a quick look at the code, a little bit of comment. Here are using statements, which maybe you're beginning to understand a bit more about now that we've built our own class. A couple of constants on initialization, just populating the form with some dummy data. And then on our user event, there's my toolbar event, and there was my message box. So first things first is that we go to project reference. And now we have covered this in the previous course, but maybe you've forgotten about it. But basically we press add. We need to navigate to wherever we put the DLL. So in this instance, we go to base, managed assemblies, and we called it my Syspro utils. So there it is there. And if we link there, now what we can see is that straight away it's put it in the list. It knows where it is. And remember that if we check this global, then what that will do is every single custom app you build from this point on will automatically put my Syspro utils.dll in this list. We're not going to do that. We're just going to leave it here. And then what we've actually got to do now is tell the code or the compiler that we're actually using my Syspro utils. And once we've done that, obviously from the compiler point of view, the references will pull it into the compilation. And from a code point of view, it says, oh, I know where to look for the methods and so on like that. So that's our first step. The next step now is to wire up the use of our person class from our my Syspro utils. So let's put it in here. We will comment out this line, and we'll just pop into here some code I've already done before, so that we don't bore you too much about it. So just as we had before, we have a person class, which has come from our utils. In the variable P, we want a new version. We're setting the first name and last name to the values that are on the form. Again, I'm using a constant to refer to the form name. Just makes it easier to read later on. And I'm using Syspro message box to say hello. So with a bit of luck and fair wind, if we run our app, looking good, press say hello, and there we go. So it's as simple as that. Just to recap, we've referenced our DLL, we put a using statement in, and now we've got access to the classes. And once we've got access to the person class, we have access to its properties and its methods. So what I'm going to do now is move on and just change this app a little bit to use one or two of the other classes, and I'll come back to you. Well, I've been working on our application designer app, and also I've been making changes to the Visual Studio project and some of the classes in there as well. But first of all, let me show you the changes to the app. We'll just run it up. Okay, that's good. So if I'm just going to just show you that nothing has changed here. We've got our first name, our last name. If we press hello, we get that as normal. I have added one thing, and I want to show you a little bit of coding example a little bit later on, and I've added another DLL, which is giving me a separate message. I've also added the log file class to here. So first name, we've got, or rather the file name is here, and then I've got a message. And if I write a message, it'll write it here. So if we just change this and go and the message, something like that, and we can write that as well, and you can see it going on. And to do this is just simply a syntax editor control I dragged from here. I had to add another method to our log file class that would read the content of the log and chuck it in here, and I'll be showing you that a little bit later on. Next step, though, is just to show you some of the changes to the code that we did, that I've done to make this work. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is that I have added a new DLL reference here, and unlike the my Syspro utils DLL, I flagged this as global. Now, what will happen when you flag it as global? It will copy the DLL to sysprodb.adm script references table, and keep the DLL contents in there, and then that will be linked and referenced by every single customization app that you do from now on as well. So that's a fundamental difference. I will be going into this in detail in the next section. So once we've done our reference, I've got a using statement, because I'm actually, the namespace in this DLL is called employee. But as it happens, I also called the class employee as well. So the namespace and the class name are the same. And when you get that, this is the technique that you use to address the class. And you have to put both the namespace and the class name in. If you did this and just put the employee in, you will get a compiler saying, in effect, I don't understand what you're talking about. You seem to be talking about a class here, but you're referencing a namespace. So you have to actually be more specific to the compiler to say, I'm actually referring to that namespace, that class, and now I want you to put a new version of that in that variable. So that's how you get around the namespace and class being the same. But it also illustrates why maybe the best thing to do is to have a namespace different from your classes, because this can become a little bit cumbersome. And then I've got a simple hello like we had before. With the log file, it's exactly the same. If you remember, our log file class was in my Syspro utils, so the using statement for the namespace is the same. We've got our class name, our variable, we're newing up the class. I'm setting the file name from the form. I'm saying I want it required. I am invoking the write log method, and I'm picking up the message from the form. And then separately, I am clearing the syntax editor control. And then if you see here, I've added a new method saying read log file contents, and I'm just chucking it in here. So it's all very, very simple and straightforward. So what I want to do now is wrap this up and go and have a look at the Visual Studio code, what I've actually changed, but it's specifically show you the test harness, because that's actually quite important. Back in Visual Studio, we can see our project where we have got our log file person and our sortoi bits. Here's our namespace, class, all fairly straightforward. And at the bottom, I added that extra method that we used in our app for reading the contents of the log file. Basically, all it's doing is checking that the file name has been set, and if not, it returns a sensible message. And if it is set, then we use StreamReader to read the whole text file and return the contents, and then we can do with it. So very, very straightforward. But what I have been working on is building up the test harness. And the reason I wanted to show you this is that initially a test harness tends to be a bit of a form on a button. But if you develop it with a view that it could be used by people on site or support people to make sure that you can test your classes separate from Syspro, then they become very, very valuable. And I just wanted to show you the development on this. So here we are. Here's my sortoi bits. Basically, it's designed to take a long text string, longer than 45 characters, and break it up into comment line elements to be able to give back to the business object sortoi. This is because the sales order entry programs and the sortoi business object can't add comments on a sales order larger than 45 characters. So if you're getting a great long string, maybe it's a description of a product or maybe delivery instructions, you need to break it up. So this is actually straightforward. Basically, all we got to do is we take some text and we just do that, and it runs it through our class and breaks it down into comment lines and so on like this. So if we add a bit more, this is a bit more text, then we will see it chucked on the bottom. Now, this is a perfect example of why one would use classes or something like a Syspro utils thing, because once it's written and you know that it works outside Syspro, then if you tie it into an app and things don't quite work, then you know that you're focusing on the app. I did a couple of other bits and pieces. We have a log file example here. And again, what I've done is I've got a modal form popping up. We've got a file name. Is it required? There's our message. There's our content. So almost identical to the app that we've actually just done. And then again, with the same with the person class, it's just popping up and saying hello and things like that. But you get the general gist. I will probably show you another test harness I used for the data sources, so that you can see how sophisticated they come. But I can't stress enough how useful developing a test harness is. So what we're going to do now is move on to the next section. I want to just discuss a bit more about these references, the DLLs, and how the C# scripting editor and the engine actually use them, and how or what you have to do if you decide to change yours and you need to do a version control.